Agriculture is still a very big part of the Canadian economy, although the sector is facing challenges in a global market. Farming and ranching are also becoming more and more expensive and high-tech these days. Joining me now to talk about it is Ken Coles. He's the Executive Director of Farming Smarter. Welcome back to Bridge City News, Ken.
Well, thanks for having me, Hal.
Why don't you explain to our viewers, first of all, what is Farming Smarter all about?
You betcha. Farming Smarter is a group that's focused on farmers in southern Alberta. We're a nonprofit organization with a charitable status, and basically we're trying to change the way people farm. We're doing that through conducting research. We do small plot research, field scale research out on the farm, and we try to adapt innovative ideas, and basically any way we can do a better job of farming, we want to be able to enable that through science. And not only are we going to share the work that we're doing, but we're going to try to build a stage for all of the other scientists and agriculturalists out there that are working on better practices so that we can get that information out to farmers so that it's being used and it's practical and applied and being impactful.
What are some of the new innovative ideas that are really helping today's farmers here in southern Alberta?
Well, there's so much going on in just about every aspect of agriculture. Just keeping up to date with the new things is a challenge. So there's new innovations in marketing. There's new innovations in what types of crop to grow and how to grow them, how to collect data, how to manage information. Lots of different things going on that will both complicate and help do a better job with their farming businesses.
Are farmers maybe considering different crops as opposed to traditional wheat, barley, maybe even canola because of the China ban, the ban on Canadian canola in China? Are they maybe considering like cannabis or hemp or something
actually,
unique?
All farmers, I think, across the province are always looking for new cropping options. So that's actually one of our main programs within Farming Smarter. We call it the Novel Crops Program. So we'll test out new crops like cannabis or hemp, things like quinoa. We've played around with things like camelina, all types of different crops that are grown in other parts of the world. We want to see how do they work here in southern Alberta. So there's a couple of things. You got to figure out how well does it grow under these conditions, and the other thing is there actually a market for it? So that's one of the challenging things with bringing in new crops is are we going to be competitive with other parts of the world, or is it something that we can have a niche and actually make some money at? So that's definitely a good question. Southern Alberta in particular with irrigation, we have a lot of high value crops and way more cropping options that are out there. So it really, I think, expands what we can grow, and it's really kind of exciting and interesting too.
So what are the soil conditions like? I know we haven't had a lot of snow so far this winter.
Yep.
So maybe are we going to have a real dry spring?
Well, I sure hope not, because we've basically come through 3 years of drought now. I actually think soil conditions are a little bit better this year than last year because we have actually had some really good fall moisture. Remember, back in September we had a big dump of snow, and January too. And the good part is that it wasn't frozen. The soil wasn't frozen, so the moisture was actually able to get in. So I don't think we're in fantastic conditions, but definitely better starting off point than last year. And it's really important too what precipitation we get in the growing season. So everybody's hopeful. This is one of those, we need to have a good year because it's been a tough go the last few years.
What are some of the hardier crops the farmers are planting right now?
In the dryland scenario, wheat is still a staple crop. So all of the wheats are doing well. The pulses are a shallower rooted crop, so they don't need it quite as much moisture, but they're quite heavily or readily adapted to a dryland scenario. It's just, it can't be zero rain. We need to have something.
Where does your funding come from? Is it private sector and government?
Yeah, so Farming Smarter actually has a broad range of funding sources. We're very much project-based, which means if there's a research project, we have to apply for a grant. So right now, we've got a really good spread between the provincial government, the federal government. We do get some support from producer grower groups. So there's some checkoffs for growing different crops. Those groups will support WGRF, the Western Grains Research Foundation is another group that helps support our projects. We generate revenue from sponsorship, from our events that we put on, and we also do industry contracts. So we'll do contract research for some of the agrochemical companies, nutrient companies, and you name it. So it's quite a diverse range of funding, and that's really my job to make sure that we are achieving what we're set out to do in our vision and building a stable base of support for what we do.
Ken, the budget came out recently here with the Alberta government. They've talked about a lot of cutbacks. Has that impacted your business as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is probably the most significant change to supporting agriculture that I've seen in my career. So we're looking at a significant reduction in support for agriculture, but mainly in really big cuts towards the provincial government itself. So their ability and capacity to do work is going to change quite significantly. If anything, that's going to put pressure on us to grow more, to be able to pick up some of the work that's being done. At this point, we really don't know yet exactly what's happening, but as far as our organization is concerned, especially given the different sources of funding that I just mentioned, we're definitely in good shape. If anything, we're going to grow.
Farming Smarter's had a long-time relationship with Lethbridge College. Now, you just signed a 15-year memorandum of understanding.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
Well, I'm actually really excited about that, and it's something that we've been working towards probably for the last 10 years. And Southern Alberta is such a hugely impactful, important piece of the ag economy. In fact, we did some work recently that showed that our area, which is basically south of Highway 1, represents 57% of the gross revenue in agriculture.
Oh.
So there's so much that happens in Southern Alberta. Because of that, there's a lot of opportunity and there's a lot of demand for work and entrepreneurship. So part of the reason we're working with the college is to be able to, work off each other's strengths and be able to serve this demanding industry. Like there's so many cool crops and businesses going on. We can't even come close to be able to service them all on our own. So the partnership allows us to put our resources together, to put our heads together, to build capacity, to be able to take advantage of some of these great opportunities that irrigation allows us to do. And just because agriculture is important, the Lethbridge College also sees that as a really important way of building human resources. So now we can partner on research, but we can partner on education as well. So we have all of these young students coming in. They're about to launch a new degree program in applied technology. Great opportunities for them to come learn about research and all the things that we're doing on our front. And the more we talk, the more we realize that there's opportunities to work together.
So if there are some young people that are considering going into farming, Ken, outside of a lot of startup capital, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think, your brain is your biggest resource. And I think the more knowledge that you can achieve through learning, the better off you're going to be.
So do your research beforehand, right?
Yeah, and also pick an area that you're going to be passionate about. And I think that's there's so many people passionate about agriculture, so I think there's something for everyone in agriculture, and I think there's actually a lot of jobs in agriculture too. So I'd always encourage students to look at programs like that at the college. If I was starting over again, I'd be looking at this new degree coming out of the Lethbridge College.
Mm-hmm. Now, farming has become a very high-tech business these days. Is there a measurable difference in success rates when you compare farmers staying up to date as opposed to maybe old-school farming techniques?
Kind of $1 million question there, isn't it? I don't think there is a way to measure it. I believe that there's innovators and laggards in every aspect of agriculture. So you can be way advanced in one area and a complete laggard in another, but it might not matter. I personally believe that someone that's dedicated to learning and always challenging the accepted practices is eventually going to be ahead of the game. But agriculture is really, the people that win it are the ones that can manage risk. So I do believe that the strengths in being able to create a farm system that best manages risks is the ones that are going to be successful.
Is there any progress being made on herbicide-resistant weeds here in the prairies?
That's also a tough question. There's progress, but there's also a lot of challenges that are increasing. So herbicide resistance is continually increasing. It's kind of like, that old Jurassic Park movie, Nature Finds a Way. Right. As we continue to do the same things, it adapts, and that's what we're seeing. More and more herbicide resistance is developing. So in that sense, we're losing the game. Is there ways to manage it? Yes. And in some senses, we're coming up with ways to deal with problems quite positively, but it's one of those ones that will continue to be a challenge for farmers moving forward and will require more and more effort and more complex approaches to dealing with it.
Are there certain ways you can test the weeds to see if they are herbicide resistant?
There's certainly ways to test them, both in your field. If you spray your field and certain weeds survive when they shouldn't, that's actually a pretty good test. You can also take samples and send them off to labs for resistance testing. So not sure if that program will continue to exist given the cuts that are going on right now, but I sure hope so. But certainly it is about paying attention to what's going on. If you're seeing strange patterns or patches of weeds, and in the case of glyphosate tolerant kochia, you can actually see strips of weeds that are left behind from the tumbleweeds rolling across the field. So certainly, yes, you can.
So since the Chinese had that Canadian canola ban, the recent stats from Stats Canada says Canada has lost $1 billion worth of business. So the canola farmers that you've talked to, tell me about some of their struggles right now.
Well, this becomes a challenge in revenue. The price of canola has been hampered by those trade restrictions, and then that forces farmers to look at, can I grow less canola? And that's basically the only option you have at this point, unless the folks that are working really hard, and they are, at recovering markets, but also in developing new markets outside of China. So whenever we're dependent on one market, that again adds risk to the farm. So I know there's a lot of effort being put into developing new markets in other countries, and also about expanding internal crushing capacity so that you don't have to depend on expanding it. But that's a question that's really out of my wheelhouse, but it is certainly an impactful one.
So what are some of the other countries we're looking at possibly getting our products to market? Maybe India?
Yeah.
Maybe South Korea? What are some of the other
I don't know.
countries?
This is not my area of expertise.
Just open it up.
But
right?
you know, that's where you have these producer commissions that are really good at focusing in on that. So the Alberta Canola Producers Commission, the Canola Council of Canada, they've got experts in that field, and working with the major grain companies, the pioneers and so on. And I can guarantee you that they're putting every effort forward in developing those markets.
It's wonderful that Lethbridge College has a lot of the programs to get people interested in farming, the agriculture sector, and actually putting their resources into that. But there are also a lot of farming families who are getting out of it altogether. They're saying, this isn't profitable anymore. Have you talked to some of those families and the reasons why they're getting out? Is it all just about the money right now, or what is it?
Yeah,
the dedication, there's a lot of hard work, right?
It's a lot of factors, and I think it's a tough business. And you'll see too that there's been a new movement looking at mental health in the agricultural industry too. I personally think there could be people that are getting out of it because it's just not fun.
And it's burnout,
and
right?
It's burnout, it's stressful, and I have a small farm on my own, and when you have a wreck, you have a really big wreck, and you got to have a pretty tough stomach to deal with the stress and the magnitude of the risks. You lose a bin of canola, all of a sudden that's $100,000 loss, just like that. So, I think those factors play in, but also, can you make a go of it? I mean, financially, you have to be able to, be able to service the debt and deal with the pressures there. But, I do think that the industry will survive, and there are folks that are moving on, but there are folks that are thriving. So
where's the biggest competition? Still from the States?
Probably ourselves. It all depends. At the farm unit, it's you're always your own biggest competition, and it could be everything from land competition from colonies. It could be everything is so very much specific. Did you own the land? Has the land been passed forward for generations? Do you have oil rights on your land? So it's pretty tough to come up with any single thing that's changing the industry. All that margins are tight. Farmers are being asked to do more than they ever did before. So it is more complex on every level, not just technology, but you never used to have to market your crops, right? Back in the day, you just sold it and that was it. Now if you want to be successful, you have to learn to be a really great marketer. You have to look at
smart business person.
Yeah, smart business planning,
Yep.
Risk management, you name it.
Wow. How about farmers that are also considering maybe more wind turbines or wind farms on their property?
Well, I think all of those off-farm revenue sources
Does that help too?
absolutely play a factor, because I see, areas that have lots of oil wells or leases on that. There's not as much pressure for them to perform on the agricultural front when you've got revenue generated from other sources. So I think, any off-farm source is going to help manage risk.
So where
I
do
have
you
a
s-
full-time job to support my farming habit, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Your farming habit, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So where do you see the industry going maybe the next 5 to 10 years, and how can the federal or provincial governments really help out farmers today?
Yeah, well, I think that as we see the technologies change in marketing, I think marketing has been the big drive recently. So can you grow a new crop and then direct market it yourself and cut out the middleman? So whenever you have a really unique opportunity there to be a price setter instead of a price taker, that's going to be the difference. We hear a lot about, marketing tools like blockchain and things like that. I don't know if that's going to be fully developed in the next 5 years. 5 years goes by pretty quick, so I'm not going to expect a tremendous amount of change, but we always tend to underestimate the change in the short term too. So I think it's steady as we go. It's managing risk. It's dealing with the weather that we have.
How about taking off the carbon tax as well, off the natural gas for drying a lot of these grains, right?
Yeah, well, when you have we have a drought, and then the rest of the province can't get their crops off. So it's totally different problems across the entire province. So that's when you talk about a government's role in trying to support that. It's pretty tough because we all have different problems. We don't need grain dryers because we barely had a crop to grow. But I think things like that definitely make a difference. If we can have exemptions on carbon tax, I can't see how that's not going to hurt. I know even on the irrigation front, it's amazing how much the carbon tax adds to something as simple as that. And the reality is that margins are tight in agriculture. So unless you're either really, really big farm or you've carved out a really nice niche, those little differences can make or break an organization.
Ken Coles from Farming Smarter, thanks a lot for joining me in studio today.
Thanks for having me, Al.